is your host, Benjamin Saxton, and welcome to a Fighter's Chance podcast, where we give people in the combat sports world an opportunity to talk about the things worth fighting for. Today's guest is Brad ARNETT, owner of NX Level, and he's in the Athletic Hall of Fame for the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater for football. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. I'm very excited to talk with you today. Not every day you get the opportunity to talk to someone who gets to shape and train some of the best athletes in the world. And you, as the owner and creator of NX Level, I'd like to just talk with you today to kind of see how it all started. Like where, your college days of playing football, and then how did we get to today? Now you run a very successful business where the likes of J.J. Watt, trains with you, other major NFL athletes. So let's just kind of kick off and we'll talk about your history and kind of go from there.
Absolutely. So, let's start at high school. I guess when you talk to just about anybody in the field that does, I guess, what I do, there's going to be something that happened in their life that kind of directed them towards strength conditioning or rehab or something along that line. And whether it was a family member went through something and they saw him struggle and they're like, God, I could do a better job than that. I need to find out more about this. Or something happened to them personally. So I tore my ACL in 8th grade football. And, that's quite a few years ago now. But so back then it was kind of, we're going to wait to do the surgery because your growth plates are open. And if we do it now, we're going to stunt your growth, that kind of philosophy.
Yeah.
So I wore a knee brace my freshman and sophomore year in high school. And after my sophomore year, my growth plates were shut. So I finally was able to have the surgery. And I was one of the first ones really for this doctor that he actually did a patellar graft on my ACL. So that was kind of the beginning back then of that whole process of whether you're going to do a hamstring or a patellar graft. But anyways, to make a long story short, I lost my entire junior year of athletics. So I went through the whole rehabilitation process of getting back to being able to compete in sports and I guess lead a normal life.
Right.
So going through that whole process of rehabilitation and PT just really got me intrigued in what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I really kind of dove myself into training myself. So not only rehabbing my leg, but really got involved in weightlifting and powerlifting and getting stronger. And that's kind of where the process of what I wanted to do started. And then fast forward, I go to Whitewater. My freshman year, my strength coach, who is actually my mentor today, Dan Worth, he is a strength coach at the University of Tennessee, was my strength coach. And him and I just kind of hit it off. And I used to sit in his office at night and we would just literally talk about training. And we were both big avid hunters, bow hunters and stuff. So we talked about that, but it was always around training and what the thought process that went into it, and just really kind of started me down that road. So I finished my career at Whitewater. And after my sophomore year, Dan left to take the strength job at University of Arizona. So he's at Arizona. I'm finishing up. And of course, I want to be a strength coach. So originally, I was going to do a graduate assistantship with him at Arizona.
Okay.
But then another opportunity opened up at the University of Minnesota. And it was a situation where I got school paid for, I got health insurance, I got a stipend.
No brainer.
It was just, as much as I wanted to be with Dan, it just created a better opportunity for me. So I went to the University of Minnesota. And the way the program went is you would spend 2 years in the program. So you would do 1 year with football, and then you would do 1 year with what you would classify as the Olympic sports. Everything, basically all your sports that compete in the Olympics besides football. So I started with the Olympic strength program, and that was in June. That November, the strength coach that was doing football, his name is Kevin Yaxall, left and went to UCLA. the guy that I was with, laterally moved over and took over football. And so I was kind of in limbo for a week, and I'm thinking, well, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to, new guys coming in, what's going to happen? And then I get a phone call from the athletic director. His name was Mark Dienhart. And I thought, oh boy, what did I do? What's going to happen here? He calls me in and he's like, well, you know what, Brad? We've spent this last week talking to all the coaches that you've been working with for the last 6 months. And they love what you do. They love everything about you, and they want to give you an opportunity. So they actually put me on a temporary no post. So I'm 24 years old, and I'm the head Olympic strength coach at the University of Minnesota.
Wow.
And I had to finish my master's degree, so they put me on a temporary no post. We were on the quarter system then, so I got it done fairly quickly and got the job. And so I'm the head Olympic strength coach at the University of Minnesota. And people always ask me, is of course, as you go through your career now, and you go to 2 different universities and you deal with all these different kids, these young kids that are graduate assistants and they want to be strength coaches, and what's the process to go through and how should you do this, right? Well, I just kind of explained to them what I did when I took the job. So I played football in college, I wrestled in high school, I played baseball. Things about tennis, things about golf, obviously, the sport of wrestling, but I didn't know anything about swimming, diving.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about hockey. I mean, I had a good understanding of how the body works. So you kind of have this concept that the body works one way. You want to get athletes to have as much symmetry and efficiency as you can. But when I came to what are the demands of the sport, what do these kids really need to be successful in their sport, I just started taking the time and meeting with all of these coaches individually and just said, okay, teach me your sport, where your kids are at now, what's been going on before, what you'd like to see change, what do you need your kids to do? And that's kind of what I did as a graduate assistant. I just started establishing relationships and started trying to learn more about the sports I was working with. And I guess that's what took the coaches to the point where they're like, you know what, this guy cares.
Yeah.
He's put the time into it. The kids are responding to what they're doing. He's being creative with some of the things that he does. And it created an opportunity for me. So my path was a little different than what a lot of guys go through, and females. That you start as a graduate assistant, and then you go through that process, and then you kind of, whether you get a low on the totem job, or somebody that brings you on an assistant, and you just kind of work your way up. So after the University of Minnesota, I'm at home, and I get a phone call from Dan Worth, who I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
And he is now the director at Arizona. And he's like, you know what, Brad, I'm getting out. I'm going into the private sector. I'm going to open basically a health fitness center. And I gave him your name. I don't know where it's going to go, but I recommended you. And if it's something you're interested in, I know they're going to call you and see where it goes. So they called me, and I ended up interviewing, and I went down with my wife, and I ended up accepting the job. So now by the time I'm 29, I'm the head strength coach at the University of Arizona.
Wow.
And that was I guess, taking all the different experiences that I had at Minnesota with dealing with so many different sports and so many different athletes, and the management of all that, created, obviously knowing Dan, but created the opportunity to come into Arizona and do that. So when I got there, they were in the process of designing a brand new facility. So I helped them finish that and go through the construction process and transition into that room. And I loved my time there. I worked with some phenomenal coaches, with Dick Tomey, and of course Lute Olson and Andy Lopez, and so many other great coaches that I worked with that to this day I still remember the conversations I had with them and their process about going through things. And I guess, the biggest thing I always talk to people about too with a guy like Lute Olson. So I take the job, and basketball is getting ready to start, preseason workout type stuff and things on the court. And so I go down there, and I'm kind of rubbing my hands together. I'm like, all right, this guy's in the Hall of Fame. These guys are preseason number 1.
Right.
It's going to be amazing. I'm going to sit here and watch this. And the first practice I watched was nothing but simplistic ABCs of basketball.
Okay.
Everybody was always doing something sometime, but it was just drills and drills and drills, and everything was based around the fundamentals. And then all of a sudden, about a week before the preseason game, he put in little defensive stuff. He put in some offensive stuff that obviously all revolves around the drills and works that they were doing. And they go out and play the first game, and they look like they've been doing it the whole time. And I guess that really implied on me the concept of, everything you do is based off of the fundamentals and doing things not till you get it right, but till you never get it wrong. And so I worked some great coaches there. And that, like I said, today still have an impact on my thought process and the way I go about things. So everyone asks, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So when I just want to kind of ask a question. So, you got your education, you get that groundwork of the human anatomy, and, you've done certain sports. So you kind of have that idea, as you said. Were there like the light bulb or surprises when you started meeting with those other coaches about, hey, what makes sense for football or baseball, doesn't make sense for the swimmer, or like maybe we should tailor a different way, because when you're learning. Oh, sorry.
I understand what you're saying. And to be honest with you, it was kind of the opposite in that there were so many similarities when it comes to the weight room and just establishing the concept of positioning. Like, for example, let's throw out an exercise in RDL. They call it a Romanian deadlift. So people call it a hip hinge with a bar. You can do it with a kettlebell. You can do things. And you look at an exercise like that and you're thinking, okay, well, let's look at a golfer. Well, would I do an RDL with a golfer? Absolutely, because when they're in that position, if you drop the weight and you put a club in their hand, they're basically addressing the bar. So, I mean, when you look at it from the concept of position and how it applies to the positions they're going to be in their sport, there is a lot of similarities. And there's two variables that you can change. You can play with volume and you can play with intensity. And yes, that does come into play when it comes in sports. Probably there's two sports that require a lot of individuality, I should say. The first one being swimming. So you've got your ultra distance, you've got your distance, you've got your middle distance, you've got your sprinters, you've got your divers. And then within that, you've got all these different scenarios going on with kids peaking and tapering at different times. So you're at Minnesota, some kids may peak for the Big Ten cuts at an early meet, and never really taper for the Big Ten. Some kids are going to taper later than that. Some kids are going to actually taper for the Big Ten. And then you've got other ones that are just very, very good that aren't going to really taper till the NC2As. So you've got a lot of different scenarios going on as to how you're going to apply that volume and intensity. And, you're not going to train a sprinter like you would an ultra distance or distance type swimmer. So you're keeping those things in mind, and some of the exercises you're doing just because of the repetitive nature of what these kids do over and over again. So you're always going to look at, low back and shoulders and core integrity and hip water and stuff like that. So then the other sports you look at is you look at baseball, and probably the biggest one in baseball is going to be your pitching staff. So you've got your starters, you've got your middle relief, and then you've got your short relief. And putting these kids on training cycles based off of when they're going to pitch, when they're not going to pitch, keeping in mind this guy's not a starter, he's a middle relief guy. So you got to kind of somewhat have some of that starter mentality with them. The short relief guys, you can, for the most part, kind of let it rip, so to speak. Your infielders and outfielders, you train them as athletes, but then you make adjustments with them once you get into in season, because the throwing volume is going to go up 20%. So you let them get acclimated to that. Then you can start to change things up. So it's really sitting down and understanding the game and what you're really going to do with them. But I guess the thing that really hit me was there is a lot of similarities in what you're going to do from sport to sport, exercise wise. But the biggest thing you're going to difference is volume and intensity, when to apply it, when to back off. But then again, it's really listening to your kids. After a while, you're going to understand which kids on your team, that you can sit down and talk with them and say, okay, guys, how is this going? How are you responding? How are you feeling? You're not going to have to question their integrity. And you're always going to have kids like that. They're going, oh, this is really too hard. I want to get out of it. But you're always going to have a group of kids that that you can talk to and get a really good beat and feel on how they're responding and how things are going.
Okay.
So I'm finishing up at University of Arizona, and I guess people always ask me, well, why did you get out? So this last May was really 15 years ago that I left. Actually, the beginning of this year was 15 years ago that I left the University of Arizona. And you know, as you go through on a personal standpoint, as you go through this job, everyone's like, you know, well, how could you ever leave college athletics and this and that? And it's hard for them to understand if they've never been in it. But you get to a point where, you know, Arizona's a big Nike school, so you've got to do 3 or 4 national talks a year everywhere for requirements on that. You partake in just about every recruiting weekend. You travel with football. You do a little bit with basketball. Basketball were really long trips. I mean, in the Pac-12 at the time was a Pac-10. You know, you leave on a Wednesday, you play on a Thursday, you travel Friday, you do your walkthrough, you play again on a Saturday. So, I mean, you're gone from Wednesday till Sunday, and it's just really, really long trips. But it just got to the point where I didn't know my kids anymore. I was never home. So if my wife would bring them to a home game or she'd bring them down for lunch, I literally would see my kids on a Sunday. So they were in bed when I left. They were in bed when I got home. It just really got to the point where I wasn't really a dad. I wasn't much of a husband. My wife was doing everything. And she just kind of got to the point where she's like, I'm not going to tell you, you can't do what you love to do, but at some point I got to be by family. I need some help. I need you around. You know, this is
time for change, right?
time for change. Exactly. So it became important as, as you get to know other strength coaches around the country, and you go into different places and you play them and stuff, and you sit there and you start to talk to them, and you look around and you see pictures in their office, and there's pictures of them with their athletes, or maybe they got the weight room renovated, or they were at a bowl game, and you kind of look around, and after you get to know them after a while, after so many years, you're like, well, hey, where's your family? Well, you know, Mary and I separated, 4 or 5 years ago. My kids are gone. It's this, is that. And so, I'm still a young guy. I mean, I'm in my early 30s, and I'm going, God, is this what I'm headed towards? I mean, is this what this is really, really all about? And culture in college athletics is constantly changing and evolving, and it gets, it's getting more and more, business-like and stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know if this is what I need, which really drove me to come back home and start Next Level and see where it went. Stay in contact with all the coaches and stuff that I worked with through the years, and give this a whirl. If it doesn't work, I can always get back in. But I've been blessed, and it's been 15 years that I've been doing this now. That's
awesome, and I'll definitely put the description, your website, and all the information for Next Level when this comes out. But when someone goes and looks at the type of sports that you guys train, your training staff, it's amazing. You literally have anything under the sun, from, like we talked about already, football, base, all the majors. There's wrestling on there. I want to talk with you a little bit on how, because you will train and coach anywhere from someone that's in youth to a professional athlete, right? I mean, you've had some of the biggest names out there. And so I want to kind of talk with you on when you're working with a professional athlete, they've had those, thousands of hours of training to get to them to a certain level. And that margin of performance increase is not very big compared to like a youth, right? Someone in youth, you're developing them. They can make those giant steps. So maybe you can walk through that mindset of when you work with a professional athlete or an elite athlete at that point, whether it's, football, baseball, wrestling, whoever, how do you get that person from that, getting them to that marginal step up to make them even better, right? Sure.
It's so a lot of these guys, as they went through the process, even starting in high school, these kids always look the part, right? You're going to look at these guys that play in the NFL and they play at these high levels. I mean, even at a young age, they look the part.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times coaches will bypass dinner and go right to dessert. Well, they don't need this. They don't need that. Look how good an athlete they are. And they don't really, I guess, look at the risks or red flags from a development standpoint, that over the course of time, whether you're a really good athlete, you're an average athlete, you're just someone that's trying to put yourself in a position to contribute, you need all the same things. So when these athletes come in, the first thing that we always do is, okay, let's sit down, let's get a medical background. What have you dealt with in the past from an injury standpoint? They may be coming in with some existing pathology, they just got over it, something that's been nagging for a long time, and you take that into account. And then you run them through just a complete thorough postural assessment. So you're looking at how their hips sit, how their shoulders sit. You're looking at hip alignment. You're looking at mobility. Is it a mobility issue? Is it a stability issue? So you're looking for areas of risk, and you're looking for red flags that you need to attack right off the bat, in order to prevent, obviously, creating more issues,
Right.
and allowing them to get more out of what you want to do with them. And so when you go through that process, I just look at them and say, here's part of the deal. You have to be willing to surrender to what you need to do right now in order to do what you want to do and do it even better.
Mm.
And when they surrender to that, that means, when I say surrender to that and what they're going to do, that means a lot of the stuff initially, it may be just a lot of body weight stuff that's going to involve increasing stability. So isolation type work, isometric type work, turning things on, using that as a way to improve mobility. Now you're pairing them with soft tissue group that I have. If there's existing pathology and they need further rehab, pairing them with the physical therapy group that we have. So you create this group of people that, our number one goal is to get them to 100%. But going through that process, it's educating them and teaching them that, look, this is where you're at. This is what you've been dealing with. We're going to get you as close to 100% as we can. I never tell anybody that I'm going to put my hands on you and you're going to be healed, or this
Right.
stuff is never going to happen again. I always tell these guys, listen, if you go to somebody and they tell you that, just stand up, walk out the door, and don't go back, because it's unrealistic. But it's an education process for them as well, too, to understand that every day they come in to train, there are constants in the program. And those constants are going to be soft tissue prep. We're going to do a good, thorough warm up. We're going to continue that activation into the workout. The weight room, from a strength standpoint, is always going to have constant referrals to what we're doing in movement and vice versa. And it's just going through this whole process, and how long they're in each process, or I should say level of the process, is totally up to them, what we're dealing with initially, or the time that I have them there. Because I have a lot of guys that may come in for a week, or they'll come in for 2 weeks and they're gone, and then I got a large group of guys that are there all the time. So it just depends on the scenario. But then when they leave, that communication doesn't stop. So you're sending them things with them. You're giving them the next progressions. Some guys will come in periodically for checkups to see how they're doing. But it's just that process of, okay, this is where you're at. We're going to look at you. This is your blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to paint a picture of what we're looking at. And now let's start to work at improving those things. And it's a catch-22, because as you teach them all these things from an alignment standpoint and how it's affecting things, they're going to put their trust in you. And
Right.
if I do this, this is what I expect to be able to do better. So you got to make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, and you're consistent and you're on top of your game, and you're always constantly assessing where they at, where they doing, getting a good feel of how they're responding and when to take that next step.
Okay. That's awesome. Next Level has been, like you said, 15 years now, going strong. You have 2 locations. You have 2 locations, correct? No.
Yes, I do. Yes, sir.
And so you've been doing really well over the, 15 years. Where would you like to take Next Level? Like, and pun intended, how would you like to take it to the next level? Like, what's the scope for Next Level?
Well, I'm not my dream isn't to make Next Level basically a facility in every state in the United States of America.
Okay.
I guess I look at it from the standpoint of the old baseball movie where they built the Field of Dreams, where you build it, they'll come, right?
Right.
I feel great about where we're at. I have athletes that come in from all over the country. Sometimes it's a tough sell. I'll get agents that call and say, hey, will you train so-and-so? And, I'll help promote you. And it's like, well, how did you find me? Well, I went on the internet and I saw this and I saw that. And I said, well, I don't know if I need much more than that. Or you get to the point where agents will say, well, you're kind of in the middle of Wisconsin, southwestern Wisconsin. It's the winter. It's cold. I want to be by the beach, right? I want to feel it's warm. And I'm like, well, I've got a transition sand pit. I mean, I do have sand here, but we do work in it. It's not to lay in and look at the water. But so, you're always going to fight
Right.
that. I guess continuing to build the brand and continuing to have all the pieces in place that when athletes do come to us, we can get them to, I always say this, just to get them to 100% where they need. And it could be a soft tissue issue. It could be a strength issue. It could be a chiropractic issue. It could be a nutritional issue.
Mm-hmm.
Just changing some things in their diet. And there again, making everything that we do an educational process and making them feel better about where they're at and where they're going and feeling that they're making improvements and them walking away knowing that I've got their best interest at heart.
Right.
And so I guess sometimes, when you look at the concept of getting really, really big and having these all over the place, sometimes it waters down the quality of it. And I've always been a big believer in the fact that if this is all going to be based off of me and the guys that work with me, and I've got some amazing guys that work with me, people need to see me. They need to meet me. They need to see me training people. And if I've got downtime and there's parents or different people out in the observatory, to go out and sit and shake their hand and talk to them and just see how things are going and get feedback from them and answer any questions they have or address any concerns they might have. So I guess when you lose sight of that a little bit and you get away from that, you're putting a lot of trust in other people to fulfill, I guess, your vision and what you believe next level is.
Right.
Sometimes that can muddy the water a little bit. So I'm happy with where I'm at right now. I mean, there's potentially we might be doing some more facilities within the state, and I'm happy with that.
So you've mentioned your team a few times. You've mentioned kind of the athlete experience coming in with with your team. Maybe you could talk through not just them working with you, but your other team members and how that kind of shapes their progress. So like maybe break out your team members and what services are offered.
Sure. As far as within Next Level?
Yeah,
absolutely. So we have a full physical therapy rehab group, and that's provided by a medical group here called Freighter Medical School of Wisconsin. So it's a large medical conglomerate, and they have a medical school. They have hospitals. They've got clinics. They've got all of that, and that's where the second facility that we have right now, which is in the North Shore. It's called Mequon. It's about an hour from the facility that I'm at. Is attached right to their facility. So they're heavily involved in the process of the Next Level and what's going on, and they run that with us. And the person that runs that, her name is Chantel Hassman, and she's phenomenal. She's a manual therapist. She does dry needling. But the great thing with our rehab situation is it's part clinical, but then it's also very, very manual and functional because they can walk through the door and they have full access to the entire facility. So you're going to have athletes that are training with us, and also clients that are doing rehab in the same space that other people are training. And so
I think that's fascinating that you can have those two intertwined and being so close to one another, because if a lot of times you have an injury and you're seeing a doctor or a PT and then you're like, okay, well, this is what they're telling me. And now they come see you. Right. Or they see whoever. Now they're trying to relay the message where you guys can actually talk right there, go through exercise. That's awesome.
100%. I mean, it totally eliminates the middleman, so to speak.
Yeah.
Wisconsin's a state that you don't have to have a referral to go to PT. But if somebody comes in with an assessment and they're coming off a pathology, or we see something that is kind of a red flag, I just walk them down the hall and I'll grab, ironically, the other PT, his name is Brad as well. So I'll grab either Brad or Chantel and say, hey, look, this is where they're at. This is what I'm seeing. Just take a couple minutes and let me know what you think. We might come to agreement then, or I'll finish up my part and they may come back for an initial consult with them. And they'll run them through their tests, and then we can get together, compare notes, and say, okay, they're fine to go with 100% with you guys. Here's the plan that we want to do. Or we might recommend that they start with PT for a little bit, still work with us, but it may be, say, a 70-30 split. And
Right.
then over the course of whatever time, obviously, we want to switch that percentage to where they're completely with us. So you're exactly right. Or things happen in training. Someone's
Right.
running, they tweak a hamstring, or they roll an ankle, or stuff's going to happen. You can walk them right in there and say, hey, we just rolled an ankle. Can you take a look at this? What do you think? And literally start that process right away to get hands on people and start that rehab standpoint. So it's a great synergy. It's really, really good. And we have baseball academies that are in with us every day. We've got volleyball clubs that are in with us every day. And we do educational groups with them as far as the athletes and the coaches. And we also do things with the parents. So a volleyball player, okay? So physical therapy will do a presentation and say, all right, here's the sport of volleyball. Here are the common things that we see in the nature of playing volleyball. And then I'll come in and curtail that and talk about the things that we do to be proactive versus reactive.
Right.
I think that's the thing that can get frustrating sometimes, is that it seems like in society today, everybody wants to play, right? And do all these things, and then something happens. So then they get referred to physical therapy, and what's the first thing they apply? Strength conditioning. So it's getting these people to understand, let's look at our model, and our model is very, very proactive versus reactive. So we've had a lot of people that come in for assessments, and they'll start the training program, and things that they did in rehab is literally a norm of what we do with people all the single time. So there's a lot of synergy and a lot of similarities to that process, and it works really, really good together.
That's awesome. You've mentioned like strength and conditioning and going back to the basics, and a lot of our listeners, they're in the combat sports world, whether it's wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu. And I'm not saying you're a fighting coach by no means, but I think you're the human anatomy, strength training. What, for someone in that realm, whether it's a boxer, wrestler, whoever, if they were to come to see you as far as like training, what type of exercises or what things that you would want to focus on from an anatomy standpoint with those type of athletes?
Well, there again, it's going to be very, very similar to a lot of, just whether it's even a normal everyday person. But if we're talking about boxers and stuff, boxers and wrestlers, things like that, the first thing you're always going to look at is shoulders. The shoulders typically are going to be rounded. So they're kind of kyphotic, what we call kyphotic. Shoulders are rounded there. Hips are a little bit tilted forward. So those hamstrings are going to be a little bit more tight. It's going to shut off some of the low ab integrity, some of the glute work. It's going to pre-stretch the hamstrings. So when you look at those type of things, and you want to get to the point where you're going to load them. So you're going to do some axial loading with them, whether it's with a kettlebell, dumbbells, a bar, a trap bar, whatever it might be. There's things that you want to do preemptive first, part of your warm up, to open up and turn some of that musculature on to make sure that you're getting the most out of what you're doing with them. So you're going to work a lot of basically upper back rhomboids, your rotators, scap integrity, that upper back integrity and lat strength to be able to open up the chest. Because you got to remember, your lat and your chest are internal rotators. Your external rotators, as far as the chest goes, are just that. So you're going to see a lot of things in boxers and wrestlers where those rotator cuffs are going to be weakened because of just the nature of their crouch. They're protecting themselves. They're always in those stances, wrestling around and reaching and pulling and stuff. So understanding that it may not ever get perfect, but if I want to imply or implement some upper body work with them, if I don't want to create more shoulder issues, right, I have to make sure that the integrity of those external rotators and the upper back integrity and the scaps and that anterior serratus and all those things are in place. I'm going to create more issues. So you have to look at what you're dealing with from the nature of the sport, but you also have to look at it from the standpoint of, well, what am I going to do with them from a training standpoint? And if I don't want to create more issues, I've got to address these things in order for them to get the most out of it, and for them to feel that their training is being a benefit, not a hindrance.
Right. Okay. No, that's great. And it gives you, that gives us a great insight of kind of where your mind's at, what you're focusing on. You have worked on, your team has worked on hundreds, if not, thousands of different people over the course of your career. I'm going to put you on the spot right now, but at Next Level, is there a story or a situation that you're really proud of that, you know, you've kind of transformed someone from maybe it was an injury or a goal of theirs and help them achieve that?
Um, God, you know, there's so many, and people always think, you know, well, you know, let's talk about JJ. Well, you know, JJ and so many, you know, his brothers and so many of these other guys that have come through, and you know, I always talk about how, you know, I've had every publication you can imagine come through Next Level and want to talk about, you know, some of the guys that we train in the NFL and some of the other sports and what you do with them. So they come in and they watch them go through the workout, and then they come in and they sit down in my office and they have this yellow legal pad and they're like, okay, so give me the recipe. What made these guys what they are, right? And I always look at them and I'm like, well, you just watched them train, right? For hour and a half, 2 hours. And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, there was probably 50, 60 other people out there. Did you really see them doing anything different than anybody else? And they're like, well, no, I really didn't. The scope of the progressions of training, the progressions of the program, they're all the same. It comes back to what I was talking about before. You can play with volume, you can play with an intensity. So as their training age gets higher, obviously you can start to push them more. But guys like Jay and his brothers and all these other guys, they have something that you can train in. It's called genetics.
Mm-hmm.
So doing the same program, you know, Jay is going to do a 60-inch box jump. Somebody else is going to do a 30-inch box jump. You know, he's going to clean 400. They're going to clean 250. It's just how the body functions. And it's, you can't train genetics. But I guess, you know, there's a story in particular. I had an athlete that came in and he was from a local high school. And this was a while ago now. And the head coach at the time was a very, very good friend of mine. I've known him since I was in high school. We used to come over and scrimmage the high school when I was playing. And so I've known him forever. And when I was away, I would come back and do different talks at maybe the Wisconsin Football Coaches Clinic or some other clinics that were in the area. And he'd always come in and sit in the front row. And I've known this coach my whole life. But so this kid comes in and he wants to train for football. And, you know, the coach calls me. He's like, hey, you know, if nothing really happens with this kid, I'm not going to hold it against you. I said, well, just relax. Let's just see where this goes. And this was a kid that was going into a senior year. He had never played varsity. He was a backup kid and was never really in a position to contribute at all. Very highly successful program in high school. High school program was very successful. And so basically it was, again, it was getting him to be comfortable being uncomfortable and surrendering to doing the little things that were going to make all the biggest difference with him, and just being consistent with repetitions and only pushing when the time was right. And so I spent a winter, a spring, and a summer with this kid. And he ended up starting in the fall, was all conference, and ended up going on to play college football. And here's a kid that really hadn't ever really played other than, say, freshman ball, a little bit on JV, had never seen a varsity down, and just really committed himself to the process and changed it and believed in it. Now, did he go from a stud? Did he go from a kind of a very subpar athlete to, say, on a scale of 1 to 10, did he go from a 2 to a 10? No, he probably went from a 3 to a 7. But the kid had work ethic. He believed in himself. His attitude was great. He was coachable. His body language was great. He was always prepared to do what he had to do. And it just translated over. I mean, he did better in school. His relationships at home with his sister and his family were better. I guess those are all the things that I look at too, from a standpoint of, I don't always judge the success of our program just on numbers, right? Measurables. Right. And when parents come in and say, hey, you know, Billy's doing so much better in school and he's getting along with his sister better. His relationships with his teachers are better. That's what makes me feel so much better, because we spend so much time talking to, and even professionals. I mean, this isn't just high school kids too that we talk about, is the fact that, listen, you guys hear all the time about what it means to be a good team player, right? A good teammate. It's, you know, it's your body language, it's your attitude, it's your work ethic, it's being prepared and showing up on time and all those things. But getting kids to understand that's what's going to make you better in life too. I mean, at some point you're going to have to get a job. And if you're not on time and your work ethic is horrible and your body language sucks and all these other things go into it, you're not going to have a job very long. But if you apply those same principles to who they are as a person, they're going to become a better person. And I've always said, the better people become as a person, they're going to be that much better as an athlete. And I don't care where they start. It just is going to make them a better player. And he really bought into that and had a great career.
That's awesome, and that's great to hear that it's not just the physical performance you're looking at. More, also the personal side of it, the outside of just athletics, right?
Right.
Some people can just be so focused and so siloed on just, this is point A, this is point B. We need to change the performance, the physical, but also what's going on about them as a human being, as a person. That's great.
People always ask me, Brad, when you were in college, what did you spend the most time in your job doing? Was it the programming and training guys and sets and reps and all these other things that you would assume would take up the life of a strength coach, right? So they're in my office, and I always have them turn around and I point to my couch. And they're like, okay, it's a couch. And I said, well, I've never had an office that didn't have a couch. And they're like, really? Why? Well, why? I said, well, I'm going to explain to you what most of my time, as even now and when I was in college athletics, entailed was you've got kids that come in from every single background in life. Some have great home lives, some don't have any home lives, some came from just horrible situations. And they walk into a college setting and all of a sudden they get everything thrown at them, right? So you've got practice, and you've got game, and you've got film, and you've got academics, and you've got the athletic training room, and you've got community outreach, and you got all these things. And they're like, what do I do? And it gets to a point where they hit a wall. And I spent a lot of time just sitting in my office talking to kids about, okay, this is where you're at. Let's figure out a plan here, and let's talk about time management. Or, I tell a story about, I used to cut coupons. I would purposely get 4 Sunday papers and I would cut coupons out. And I had a coupon board outside my office. People are like, well, what's the purpose of that? Because I would literally take kids to a grocery store and I would teach them how to shop. I would teach them how to shop with coupons and how to shop the outside aisles and how to cook with a crock pot. Take it to a laundromat and teach them how to wash their clothes. It's just all these life skills that some kids don't come in with. And I just felt it was, if my job as a college coach, and which I was, part of our job is to help these boys become men and girls to become women, and teach them life skills and teach them things that they're going to use the rest of their life. And that's what I spent most of my time with. And I still today, when these kids come in, you get to know them and you can see them. Kids, they wear their emotions on their sleeves, and you don't have to pry or push them up into a corner and say, okay, what the hell's wrong with you today? But, once in a while, just occasionally ask them, hey, you seem kind of down today. What's going on? Oh, I flunked a test, or I'm this, or I'm that. And you can see, like, when they walk in and they step on the turf, they're kind of already underwater. Their mind's somewhere else, and they got all these things going on. So you just pull them off to the side and you sit down and you talk to them about, and a lot of it has to do with just time management, and not procrastinating and wait to the last minute, and just having more balance to what they're trying to do. And because these kids don't understand that when they go through these recruiting processes, everybody loves them, right? They're you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and all of a sudden they show up on campus and they're just another number, right?
Right.
Another fish, they're another fish in a much bigger pond. So the more that they can go in prepared with what to expect and having an etiquette to what we do, but also time management and the understanding that I need to take a little time once in a while to do some things for me, just to get away from some stuff. Just talking about all those little things that really, really go a long way. So I guess I'm proud of the fact that we've never had a kid come back that said, God, was this a waste of time? I went to college and I was totally unprepared and this didn't help me. We get letters all the time. We get thank you letters, whether it's, handwritten or an email or social media stuff. They'll send you a message. Hey, I just did this, did that. And I contribute a lot of it to what we talked about at a certain point. And there's a lot of times that I may not even remember having the conversation with them, but then when I read it, I sit back and I'm like, oh God, yeah, I remember that. I totally forgot we talked about that. So those are the things to me that I think are really, really important. And the same thing with the professional guys, just talking to them about the fact that whether it's a fighter, a baseball player, a football player, basketball, whatever it is getting these guys to understand that, listen, you've been given a talent, you've been given an ability that not everybody gets. So do it the best you can, but part of that process is don't be remembered just for doing what you did on the field. Make a difference in people's lives. Leave something behind that people are going to remember you for, something other than just playing the sport. And I know all of the guys that come in and train with us are just quality, down to earth citizens that want to make a difference, and they're good guys, and they understand that process, and they're all doing a great job to make a difference in people's lives.
That's awesome. I want to give you that before we wrap up. I want to give you the opportunity, if you have any special projects outside of Next Level, if you work with any charities or you have anything else going on that you want to talk about, I want to give you the platform and opportunity to share.
We do a lot with JJ's foundation,
Okay.
and just obviously helping supply things for underprivileged school programs and the things that he's trying to do from that aspect. And a lot of the other guys have different things that they're involved with. It may not be in their name, but we're trying to set up a part on our website to get more of that information out, that if people feel that they would like to help out or contribute in any way, that information can get out there, and they can certainly help with us with that. But other than that, we do a high school, we do a large high school football combine for the kids in the state of Wisconsin to get them exposure. And we usually have about 90 to 100 college coaches that come in and can see these kids compete, and gives them an opportunity just to have exposure. A lot of these kids wouldn't get that opportunity. So we do that. We have a weightlifting team, so we host a lot of Olympic lifting meets. We have a meet coming up this next Saturday that we're hosting. That's kind of getting the ball going again after this whole COVID thing and stuff. So we stay involved with that. I personally coach high school football, so I'm involved in that aspect, and I do everything I can to, help out from that aspect too, and just remind coaches, listen, you guys got a great stage and a podium to talk to these kids about a lot of things that they may not hear every day. So I have fun with what I do. And, I got 4 of my own boys. One is finishing up college. Another one just finished his sophomore year. And then I got one a rising senior and a rising junior. So that keeps me busy. Plus the business keeps me busy. But, I guess that's the life of a coach. And it's all I know. And it's probably all I'll ever do.